It's one that we're working every day to make sure that we restore a level of normalcy and a level of protection on the levee systems to make sure that come next March, we're in as good a position as we can possibly be.
Amazingly, still a lot of standing water here on the sides of Interstate 29. This is an exit here in Iowa. Now, the latest forecast for this winter is above average precipitation for the northern Great Plains and the Midwest. Now, what that means is that could cause an abnormal snowmelt to come down into the Missouri River Basin, causing even more flooding this spring. In Nebraska, longtime farmer Bill Armbrust knows 2019's extreme weather will be talked about for years to come.
It's wet like we've never seen in Nebraska before, but just 2012 we had a dry year that was dry like we've never seen before.
And it looks like 2019's financial burdens will linger just as long as the swollen rivers and lakes are.
With the levees broke, there's going to be a crop insurance issue there that might not be able to get crop insurance, and that'll be devastating. So there's no end in sight for us here.
Unless that forecast for a long, wet winter doesn't come to fruition. Robert Ray, The Weather Channel.
Our special 2020 Race to Save the Planet is coming up in just moments. Listen to what some of the candidates said about what they fear most when it comes to climate change.
There's so much about how I think about this that is really through the eyes of my baby nieces, who are 1.5 and 3 years old. And they are full of joy, they are full of life, and I think about what this planet will be when they turn 20. You know, the UN has told us over the next 12 years, if we do nothing, it will be irreversible in terms of the harm.
I'm worried about the coasts. I'm worried about the coastlines in this country. I'm worried about the levels of the ocean rising and how that is going to impact our coasts.
Climate change is real, and if we're going to protect this planet for our children and our grandchildren, we have got to be aggressive, we have to be bold.
This is our only planet, and I think of the responsibility that we have to future generations. We didn't inherit this earth from our grandparents. We're borrowing it from our grandchildren. And we have a responsibility to leave them an earth that is sustainable.
Looking forward to it. That's just a few minutes from now, and we come back discussing how extreme weather and changing climate affects farmers in the breadbasket of America.
So how did this happen?
I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride.
Oh, get your birdseed ready, honey.
United Healthcare helps connect you to care whenever you need it.
So I'm not going to need stitches then?
No, just the antibiotic cream. Oh, watch out.
Oh.
United Healthcare.
Something's going on that is real. The science is clear. We need to stop with hysteria, and we need to stop with the ignorance.
There's just no time for us to argue over whether climate change is real.
We have to feel a sense of urgency.
This is a clear and present danger.
We can do something about this.
Let's roll up our sleeves and find a solution.
2020 Race to Save the Planet, premiering tonight at 8 with limited commercial interruption on the Weather Channel.
This is the all-new Chevy Silverado HD. It offers head-up display.
Wow, that's dialed in. I can still keep my eyes on the road. My truck doesn't have that.
It offers an optional technology package with up to 15 different camera views.
That's quality picture.
It even offers one enhanced view that makes your trailer appear invisible to help you see what's behind you.
Oh, wow.
Which in this case happens to be the competition, since they don't offer the same amount of cameras as the Silverado.
Literally in the rear view.
Where they should be.
At Kay, we know that every gift is important, but the most important gift is the one you give to the person who believes in you. All year long, every best gift ever begins with Kay.
The Dish voice remote just got even more powerful. Why'd we put so much technology in there?
You don't think I've watched a lot of football? You want to put a little wager on it? Bet.
So you can settle that bet without ever taking your eyes off the game.
How many D1 football teams are there?
What you do with that power?
Oh, it's gotta hurt.
Well, that is totally up to you.
Don't look so sad, man. Come on, we're having fun.
New Dish voice remote with the Google Assistant. Dish, tuned into you.
Only one thing's more exciting than getting a Lexus. Giving one.
How did you guys?
Don't ask.
The Lexus December to Remember sales event.
Get 0% APR for 60 months on all 2019 models.
Experience amazing at your Lexus dealer.
Now only at Domino's for $7.99 each, you can carry out all 5 crust options with any 3 toppings. Try handmade pan crust when you crave something thick and hearty. Or carry out any of our 5 crusts for just $7.99 every day, only at Domino's.
Hi, I'm Joe Namath. If you're on Medicare, this is important information. This year, Medicare Advantage plans are allowed to include several benefits to help make your life easier. I called the Medicare Coverage Helpline and they instantly looked up my coverage. The agent noticed there was coverage in my area that includes many benefits to make my life easier. But I didn't have the new benefits yet. In this one simple call, they offered to enroll me in a plan that includes rides to medical appointments, private home aides, doctors and nurses' visits by telephone, and even home-delivered meals. The plan also includes dental, vision, hearing, and prescription drug coverage, all at no additional cost. Get what you deserve. Call the number on your screen now. It's free.
Call 1-800-975-4570. That's 1-800-975-4570 now.
Tonight on the Weather Channel at 8, 2020, Race to Save the Planet, and at 9, Heavy Rescue. Then at 10, Ice Pilots.
Join us in just a few minutes for 2020 Race to Save the Planet, a 1-hour primetime special featuring conversations with 8 Democratic and Republican presidential candidates. Stephanie Abrams and I talked to them about the communities impacted by extreme weather, climate change, and their plans to find solutions. 2020 Race to Save the Planet will air with limited commercials, and you can join the conversation on social media using the hashtag Race to Save the Planet. And then at 9 p.m. Eastern, we'll continue the conversation on Twitter. Join me, meteorologist Chris Warren, and Jamila King, reporter with the Climate Desk, as we take your questions. Follow @Pattern on Twitter to join the conversation.
All right, well, just before the break, we were talking about the devastating year that farmers in the heartland have had. Many were unable to bounce back from historic flooding in the spring. So we had historic flooding all the way through the Missouri River Valley, through the Mississippi River Valley. And the question is how climate change is playing a part in this and what kind of an impact that it's having on our farmers who are really struggling.
And when you think back to what caused all this, it goes all the way back to last winter with big snowfall amounts and then really quick snow melt. That was the beginning of the mess in the middle of the country, followed up by all these springtime rains, and it was record-setting in terms of the battle along the Mississippi River, how long it stayed in flood stage down in Baton Rouge and New Orleans.
Did you get a chance to talk with any of the candidates, because you spoke with them one-on-one, about the toll it takes on our farmers, the extreme weather patterns that we're seeing now, and that livelihood is so dependent on weather.
Yeah, we talked with all the candidates about farmers, and they had all thought about it. So, our farmers, you can take some comfort in knowing that people are talking about you and they're thinking about you, and what is happening to our farmers, what's happening in agriculture, has gotten the attention of our politicians in this country. Now, we also talked about what could some of the potential solutions be, and with the premise of some of the questioning being, in some of the same states in our country, you have a very big farming industry. At the same time, some of those same states are heavily reliant on coal to produce energy. How do you navigate that? And you'll see here in a few minutes how all the various candidates plan to deal with that very complicated question.
It's such a small percentage of our population are farmers, but it's so critical. And this hits everybody. This isn't just the farmers that are being impacted.
And you know what? When I flew into Paradise, California, well, I didn't fly there. I flew into Sacramento and then we drove. But when we flew into Sacramento, I came in over this enormous Central Valley of California, and I hadn't ever had quite that good of a view of how expansive the agricultural industry is in Central California. And then you drive up to Paradise, California, and you see what happened with the fire. And in one little trip, I saw for myself all of these competing issues when it comes to climate change, and realizing how much of our country's food, agriculture, occurs in just that one Central Valley. And then going back to our last conversation, how much they rely on water. It is amazing how big our farming industry is, and that's just one state. Our whole country has a big farming industry, and then you think about the whole world, how important farming is. Still, we're in a technological age, but farming is at the core.
Right. One thing we're learning from farmers recently is that if farming is not becoming profitable for them, they're turning to other means of income, like renting their property to renewable energies, wind farms, solar farms.
Yeah, they're having to think creatively, but I think you'll hear in the special tonight a lot of candidates talking about how they propose the federal government comes to the aid of farmers.
This has been a very rough year for them for so many different reasons, whether it be weather, politics, whatever. They have really taken it hard this year.
Yeah, and so I don't think any of us really believe that that farmers aren't in need of help from the federal government. I think that's pretty clear. It's just a matter of how much, what kind, and what ought to be done about dealing with the effects of a changing climate that are causing more water problems, more extremes where they can't even plant in a year like this in some cases, and also how do you bring the farmers along as part of the solution? For example, there are a number of ways that farmers have been helped out in the past to help them recover from disasters. But what about, how do you help farmers make the transition to more sustainable farming practices? That's part of the conversation tonight as well.
So what are you hearing from the candidates? Are you hearing a wide variety of solutions? Are you seeing more of a consensus?
Oh, you'll see a wide variety. I mean, that's what makes this special so unique. I mean, in all honesty, there's never really been an hour of television quite like what you're going to see in the next hour, where you have a combination of the science and the facts about climate change and several different candidates for President of the United States from two parties on what they propose to do about it based on what the science is telling them. It's really unique. And you will hear a variety of proposals for how to handle these various problems, farming, fossil fuel transition, and so forth.
Ultimately, it comes down to this, and this is a big conversation we have in this country, is the scientists are, we are elbows deep in the data, but you don't make the decisions. The policymakers make the decisions, and that's when you want them to be just as informed as the general public, so they're making the best decisions for all of America.
Yeah, well, you'll hear a number of candidates say tonight, the science tells us this. And then here's what I think we should do about it. It's really going to be interesting. So 2020, Race to Save the Planet is next. Join the conversation on social media using the hashtag Race to Save the Planet. And at 9 p.m. Eastern, we'll continue the conversation on Twitter. Follow @Pattern to join us.
I have a feeling you're going to be bombarded tonight. You're going to be a busy
I hope
man.
so. I want the conversation to be very energetic and for it to continue long after tonight.
Get some answers from this guy. This is a smart gentleman.
I'm learning a lot too.
You'll be very informed. Hey, for all of us here at Weather Underground, thank you so much for watching.
Hope you have a great night, and remember, together we know more.
All right.
Climate change. The phrase itself has become a lightning rod of controversy.
Let's listen to the consensus of the scientific community wherein they've said this is real.
This is where the sea level rise is coming from. This meltdown is changing the world.
There are those who are denying the fact of it all.
You're going to have catastrophic weather, unlike anything we've seen to date.
Famines and droughts, more instability.
The fact is, climate change is real. It's happening now, and the stakes couldn't be higher.
We are living right now in the critical years.
This is the most important issue I think the entire world is facing.
I think we have no choice but to act.
I'm worried that we're running out of time.
Now, as we stand squarely at the crossroads of our planet's future, a pivotal moment looms with the upcoming 2020 presidential election. In the race to save the planet.
I'm Dr. Rick Knabb, meteorologist with the Weather Channel and former director of the National Hurricane Center. In partnership with the Climate Desk, a consortium of journalists reporting on climate change, my colleague Stephanie Abrams and I sat down with 8 presidential candidates from both parties to hear their solutions. We should note that we invited President Trump and former Vice President Biden, but they did not accept our invitation. For the first time ever in a U.S. presidential race, climate change has become a major campaign issue.
I think too often still we think of climate change as something that's happening only on the North Pole or maybe only on the coasts. The reality is, in different ways, every part of the country is being impacted by climate change.
I'm a conservative Republican, but there are too many folks denying its reality. And what I say to my friends is, wait a minute, let me get this right. We believe in science and the way it can do amazing things with our body. And we believe in a drug that can have healing powers based on science. But we don't believe in science beyond our bodies? I mean, that just doesn't make sense.
We cannot be pushing science fiction on an issue that literally will impact everyone regardless of their gender or their race or where they live or the party with which they're registered to vote or the language their grandmother speaks.
There are many differing opinions as to how cities should adapt to a changing climate, but there's only one set of facts. Meteorologist Paul Goodloe joins us with more.
Average global sea level has risen about 8 inches in the last century and continues to accelerate upward. The concentration of CO2 in our atmosphere is the highest it has been in at least 800,000 years. The planet's average surface temperature has climbed roughly 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit since 1900. Based on records dating back to the late 1800s, the top 5 warmest years are all since 2014. And 2019 is currently on pace to be among the warmest. But it's not just statistics. We are experiencing the evidence of climate change all around us. The strongest hurricanes are getting stronger. Heavy downpours are increasing across the U.S., and wildfires, no longer limited to a season, are now a threat all year long. The candidates running for president see this evidence building as they campaign across America.
The first thing I think about is South Bend, and knowing that we're just one extreme storm away from having hundreds or thousands of families out of their homes, whether it's something that causes this river to rise, a flash flood, a tornado, or some disaster I can't even think of.
Not to be alarmist, but there are calculations that a lot of lesser developed countries, because of extreme weather and flooding, are not going to be able to support their populations. And, you know, I say that this surge is going to be a lot more than 7 or 13 feet, and I'm pretty sure that's right. So when I'm in New Hampshire, I tell people, you know, Hampton Beach, parts of Dover, forget it. It's not going to be there.
If you grew up on a farm on the coast of South Carolina that is surrounded by water, and you watch the cycle of certainly tides coming in and going out, but you watch in the ways in which those tides are rising,
and you watch the way in which hurricanes, again, do amazing damage, you'd say, no, let's this issue. This is a clear and present danger that's not talked about enough in American society.
And flooding is just one part of the equation. According to Yale University research, wildfires have destroyed nearly 40 million acres of U.S. land over the last 5 years, a trend scientists say that's likely to continue in a warming world. Wildfires are burning basically all year, coast to coast in this country. What has changed in the past few years?
The trend appears to be more large-scale fires, longer, warmer summers, which generally will equate to longer seasons and probably larger fire seasons.
In the last 20 years, the agency in charge of fighting large-scale fires has had to double the number of meteorologists working wildfires nationwide.
The length of fire seasons that we have been seeing, they've been longer. Back in the early 2000s, you would get 6-7 months, and now we're lucky to get a couple of months of break before we send out the next on-site meteorologist now.
Here's what we know for sure. The planet is warming quickly. The overall global temperature is warmer now than it has been in the past 1,000 years, and likely longer. Greenhouse gases are trapping more heat than ever. It's all creating hotter areas, longer droughts, more fuel for bigger wildfires. But it's not just the planet getting warmer, it's us getting bolder. We are building homes right next to the woods, even deep in the canyons where fires begin.
There's more people moving into the wildland that we have to worry about. It is a huge change. I think that's a big part of it.
Things will burn hotter, the fires will be more aggressive, the tactics will have to be changed in order to combat those fires. Longer seasons inherently mean more extreme fire behavior.
Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont released his climate plan in Paradise, California, a community devastated in 2018 by the Camp Fire, the deadliest and most destructive wildfire in California history.
It's unbelievable. It really is. I mean, you know, I didn't know what to expect before I came here, but this is to try to imagine what was going on in November, the destruction of an entire community, the loss of some 18,000 structures. It is sobering, I guess is the word. It is sobering what can happen to one community, to know that we're seeing more and more severe fires of this kind all over California, all over the world.
Those firefighters who are fighting those wildfires in California and fighting those wildfires while their personal homes are burning to the ground, connected with the farmers in Iowa that are losing a whole season of crops because of the flooding, connected with the families in our Gulf states that have sewage in their backyards and their basements are flooding. It's a common concern, those floods, those fires, those hurricanes. It will impact all of us equally. That's the incredible thing about Mother Nature. She doesn't care about who you voted for in the last election. So we're all in this together, and we will literally rise or fall together on this one.
Even though the candidates agree that we are all in this together, what they don't agree on is the cost to fix it.
Plans from the Democratic candidates range from just under $2 trillion all the way up to $16 trillion. This money would go towards initiatives such as researching energy alternatives, repairing water infrastructure, and job training. While on the Republican side, candidates are voicing policy changes without putting specific numbers against their plans.
How do you convince voters that this is not going to disproportionately affect their finances, their wallet?
That's a good question, and the answer is, what's the alternative? So what the issue is, you're saying, Bill, we're spending a lot of money. You're right. My plan is a very expensive plan. My plan will have a major impact on the economy. We think at the end of the day, it's going to create a whole lot of good paying jobs. But the more important point is, what is the alternative?
So here's a plan I've got. And that is, first, that we increase our investment in research and development tenfold in this whole area, green area. And boy, we do it at our research universities around the country. Part two is to say to industry, you can use whatever it is we're developing, If it was developed with federal tax dollars, you can use it, but you've got to build those items that you want to sell right here in the United States of America. If American taxpayers are going to pay to develop it, then American taxpayers are going to get the jobs from it. So that's the second part. And then the third part is the federal government steps back in and says, and we're going to start marketing, and even in some cases giving away this stuff all around the world.
I'm, again, a advocate of the free enterprise system. I think that, you know, the existing level of subsidy is about as far as I want to go. I think that we need to rejigger the subsidies as they now exist. I mean, for instance, if you look at the math on ethanol, at the end of the day, it takes more energy to produce that product than is ultimately produced by it.
I propose that we quadruple our country's investment in things like renewable energy, energy storage, and carbon storage. If we quadrupled it to north of $20 billion, then it would be more in the neighborhood of some of the biggest projects our country's taken on, like the moon landing or the Manhattan Project. And this is certainly as urgent, as pressing as any of those things that we've taken on before.
Going green, a common phrase in the climate change debate, but rebuilding the energy infrastructure of a country built on oil, gas, and coal won't be easy. You've talked about, in order to address climate change and the transition from fossil fuels to renewables, to involve letting the market decide. What do you mean by that?
I mean that the emitters would decide how much carbon they wanted to emit. And if the price was very high, they would emit less carbon. And if it was $5 a ton, as has been proposed by the Trump administration, they might decide they wanted to emit lots of carbon, and it would fluctuate until it eventually stabilized, the equilibrium between supply and demand.
What is the solution for voters who have jobs and interests in the fossil fuel industry?
Well, for the workers in that industry, we have to, we have to encourage that those industries do better in terms of giving the workers an ability to transition into the jobs of the future, such as renewable energy. And there are, you know, if the Bureau of Labor Statistics...
Zero in taxes, because we're pushing so many subsidies towards them to incentivize the wrong kind of energy production for our climate.
So I think that there is a full buffet of different renewables that we need to take advantage of and grow in terms of our energy platform. But I also think we need to be realists. And this is where I say to my Democratic friends, at the end of the day, right now where we are, renewables at the end of the day will not handle our baseload capacity. And so I think we have to take an earnest look at nuclear. It has its imperfections, it has its problems, but in terms of carbon emissions, it's a healthy alternative, particularly given the base need requirements of our society and in its industrialized form.
We're going to produce about 1.2 million new green manufacturing jobs right here in America. Good union jobs, good use of the spaces where the old factories were that are now hollowed out. This is the America of the future, and look what we've just aligned. We've aligned good jobs with protecting our earth and cleaning it up, and doing it in a way that doesn't just take a narrow focus, but that looks at it all around the globe.
And it's near the top of the globe where one major climate threat to the U.S. begins, where billions of tons of ice is melting and melting quickly. Weather Channel correspondent Dave Malkoff explains why disappearing ice is putting the entire U.S. coastline in danger.
In the past 15 years, Greenland has lost 4 trillion tons of ice, raising global sea levels by about a half an inch.
Every year, Greenland loses more ice than it gains in snow.
Every time a glacier crumbles in Greenland, it turns into icebergs. Those icebergs melt and the water has to go somewhere. It's simple math. This plus this amplifies this kind of massive flooding on the coasts of our country.
So this is the real risk, seeing the land ice melt.
The latest 2019 report from the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warns global sea levels could climb by more than 3 feet by 2100. Well, science says without a doubt greenhouse gases have been building up since the industrial age started burning fossil fuels. Most of the warming that's going on happens out at sea. Here's a look at the ocean heat increasing just since 1995, warming the surface and down deep.
Sunlight gets in, heat doesn't get back out. So we're literally trapping it just like a greenhouse, and it's heating up the entire planet.
The warmer water is eating away at Greenland's ice where it touches the ocean. The National Snow and Ice Data Center says Greenland is now losing 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools of water every second.
The rest of the world gets a lot of water and goes up.
You may be surprised where he means by the rest of the world. This is southeast Texas.
I've never seen the water this deep in 39 years.
One after the other, devastating floods have hit the area around Beaumont. There was Hurricane Harvey in 2017 and Tropical Storm Melda in 2019.
Everybody had just got back into their homes.
According to NOAA data, relative sea level rise in this area is up around 18 inches in the past 60 to 70 years. The Texas coast is sinking as the sea is rising, making these kinds of floods worse here in deep red oil country.
People who experience these events are actually more inclined to recognize that climate change is happening.
Houston-based professor Dr. Simone Howell has spent her life decoding how these events in the Arctic affect real people.
And actually, I would argue that it is first and foremost a social issue.
Come on, Josh.
Is there anybody who's thinking about moving out because of this?
Oh, I'm done. I'm not moving back in.
You're not?
I'm not rebuilding.
When did you make that decision?
When this come in. I mean, this will be the second time I'd rebuilt in 2 years.
It's a sure sign that we are experiencing a different kind of climate.
Now, of course, there are a ton of issues that cause this, but higher sea levels don't help. So in the U.S., there's a lot of people who will see this and say, that's something that I've heard is not actually happening.
Climate change.
Yes.
Do hurricanes and tropical storms seem like they're getting stronger?
They are. They are. You know, I mean, I don't know why, but it's just Mother Nature. Can't do nothing about it.
If we can recognize that science is not opinion, and we can continue to have our opinions, but we need to recognize the science, then we can move forward and make all the changes that we need to. It really is a question of political will.
We went out to a glacier in southern Iceland that's melted 6 miles back from the ocean, but is still pouring new, fresh water into the sea.
This is all going to be gone?
This is all going to be gone.
How fast?
I mean, this tongue is going to be gone in our lifetime, in about 50 years. And where we're standing right now, we'll probably be standing in the lake in about 10 years or so.
Look, I get it. It's nearly impossible to decouple climate change from politics. So forget about the politics for a second. Forget about the word climate change. Think of this as just a water distribution problem. We have the world's largest freezer full of ice that's just spilling right out into the ocean right here. This is where the sea level rise is coming from. This meltdown is changing the world.
Are you in favor of significant federal investment to build against sea level rise for our coastal communities?
So let me put it in a little broader context, and that is, as a country, we're going to have to make investments in hardening our infrastructure against climate change. Now, at any given location, that may mean protecting against sea level rise. It may mean moving. It means a lot of different things. Yes, we have got to change our infrastructure, to harden our infrastructure, to make our infrastructure more resilient to the climate change that is coming, to the rise in sea levels that are coming, to the flooding that's coming, to the wildfires that are coming. We got to do this all around our country, but we got to figure out the smart ways to do it as we go along. I'll just give you my bottom line. I believe in science, and we really got to make sure when we're putting our dollars down, we're putting them down in the right way.
To me, this is part of the larger story of our need to invest in infrastructure across this country. And yes, building resilient infrastructure and ways to combat the swamping of some of our neighborhoods is going to be an important part of that. Now, for the long run, we've also got to be smart about planning for the future and making sure that we bear in mind the way that these waterways may change for future building. We also have a duty to protect this country and to protect people who have so much riding on our ability to support life in coastal areas.
Are you in favor of significant federal investment to build against sea level rise?
Absolutely. And again, it's, look, what you want to know, I know as a Californian, when we deal with the wildfires, I know as a United States Senator, when I go down to Puerto Rico or Florida or Texas and look at the devastation from hurricanes, or here in Iowa, the devastation from flooding, that you're going to either deal with it on the front end or the back end. How do you think FEMA does what it does? It's about federal resources going into the cleanup. But hey, it's actually smarter for us to do everything we can to invest in the prevention of the devastation that is occurring in so many of our states. And so that's how I look at it.
So let's look at the price of doing nothing. Meteorologist Jen Carfagno shows us what could happen along our coastlines.
Take a look around. It's the year 2100, and a warming planet has forever changed American cities. Here in Charleston, streets are permanently flooded, rendering parts of the city uninhabitable. Climate predictions from decades ago have come to fruition, and unfortunately, humans ignored the warnings. Warnings that are visible now. Look at Norfolk, Virginia, where today in 2019, climate change is already having real consequences. Just a steady onshore breeze and a high tide can lead to flooded roads and homes. It's even led to extensive delays in Navy ship repairs.
Recently, we've talked to a lot of mayors of some coastal cities and metropolitan areas, and they've expressed a significant concern about sea level rise and how it could affect their cities.
Oh, they're going to be blown away. They're going to be blown away. I mean, right now, people in Boston are planning to deal with a 7-foot surge. Some buildings, I think, are planning for as much as 13, 14 feet. But it's going to blow away those numbers. If the Arctic polar ice cap melts, you're going to see surges at least much greater than that. And our coastlines are going to be completely rearranged. The property that's now coastal property will not be coastal. It'll be underwater.
Are you ready to spend a lot of federal investment on building against sea level rise?
With the alternative being that some of these cities go underwater? Yeah, I think that's what you got to do. But you see, this is the point. People say, Bernie, your proposal is expensive. Well, dealing with today, just today, the crisis of climate change is expensive. What are they going to be telling me 30 years from now if we do nothing?
You know, you have sea level rising, and you see a lot more fair weather flooding with these king tides, anywhere from Jersey to Charleston. We've seen them, we just saw them in South Florida, also in Miami. But it costs tens of billions of dollars to change this infrastructure and help all of these cities, you know, which states obviously can't afford. Do you think there should be federal funding for these states?
Absolutely. Look, the only way in the short term, Stephanie, and long term is a partnership between the federal government and business and innovation in this country. The federal government's going to have to devote resources because, as you mentioned, in the next 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 years, there are going to be immediate needs. But then when we look out at, the 100-year horizon, and we talk about the raise in global temperature in 100 years, well, 100 years sounds like a long way off, but you need to act. Begin acting now. Again, reasonably. Federal government's got to play a role. The federal government shouldn't be the be-all, end-all, though.
In the heartland, the crisis isn't on the 100-year horizon, it's now. When we return, some Americans stand to lose everything in the face of a warming planet. But the 2020 presidential candidates say they have solutions to protect their livelihoods and the earth.
The reality is nobody has more to lose than farmers when it comes to our changing climate.
I think the American people are not going to sit still for the disappearance of Bessie the cow, not on your life.
When you're ready for fun, just say the word.
Arctic Dog.
Who's with me?
You can count on me.
It's the coolest movie of the year. Arctic Dogs. Poopy. Rated PG. Now playing in theaters.
Dodge power dollars to all, and to all, out of my way!
The Dodge Black Friday sales event is coming to town.
I'm your 70-pound St. Bernard puppy, and my lack of impulse control is about to become your problem.
No, come on. I saw you eating poop earlier. Hey!
My focus is on the road, and that's saving me cash with DriveWise. Who's the dummy now?
Forget Allstate. Where good drivers save 40% for avoiding mayhem, like me.
Sorry! He's a baby!
Our changing climate, a clear and present danger threatening Americans from coast to coast, and an issue that needs more attention in the upcoming 2020 presidential election. Voters are seeking solutions. It's already hitting America's heartland hard, more specifically, the farming community.
This year was extraordinarily wet. Wet like we've never seen in Nebraska before. But just 2012, we had a dry year that was dry like we've never seen before.
I see a whole series of events that we're just not accustomed to, and I think all of these, probably should raise some pretty clear red flags.
Are we on a wetter time period? Yes. But I also know that just a short 7 years ago, we had record drought, and it was, never going to change. And I think we get carried away saying never, or saying that this is exceptional.
I have no idea how somebody could look at all of the science and deny that there's weather changes happening. When we as farmers rely on science and research as deeply as we do, it's hard for me to believe that they would deny this research.
2019 is a year like no other. We had $1 billion worth of damages to agriculture. We set new all-time flood high-level stages, not by inches, but by feet.
So in Indiana, home to a very large farming industry. Also, the state is heavily reliant on coal currently. How do you navigate a climate change policy that addresses both of those economic realities?
Well, I think what we've got to do is we've got to invite everybody to be part of the solution. The reality is nobody has more to lose than farmers when it comes to our changing climate. For example, this year, 2019, a lot of planting was prevented or deferred because the fields around here were so waterlogged. I envision asking rural America to be part of the solution. And that means not only urging, but paying farmers to implement more sustainable techniques. Now, the way I see it, if America can pay farmers to, for example, not sell their goods to China, then I'm pretty sure we can pay farmers to be on the pioneering front edge of these techniques.
I think the federal government is going to have to offer support for farmers in meeting their obligations, and they would have obligations because grass-chewing cows really do contribute to the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. It wouldn't be anything like an oil or a gas company or a mining company, but they will have obligations, and I think the American people are not going to sit still for the disappearance of Bessie the cow, not on your life.
The American people also won't stand for new policies that result in massive job losses without a plan to replace them.
I'm not here to suggest that my plan is going to solve every problem, but my plan understands the severity of the crisis and acts boldly. And in the process, when we make a fundamental transition away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy, we create 20 million new jobs. There will be some job loss, but we create 20 million new jobs.
Well, one of the big mistakes I've seen in the past from my party is not telling the incredible patriots who work in coal mines, providing the fuel. Literally, my ancestors were coal miners, digging out of the earth what we needed to fuel industrial greatness. To say to them now, okay, we're done with you, go work in a minimum wage job in a fast food restaurant, that is unacceptable to me. And so my plan puts a big investment in really making sure that people have floors to their economic well-being so that they don't go below, and have pathways, training, another support to transition into a new era economy.
Unfortunately, we've got people who do want us to do away with fossil fuels tomorrow, and we've got people, again, on my side, who never want to look at clean energy. There's got to be a way to transition, and all of these Americans who lose their employment over the years, again, have to be retrained, just like we need to retrain workers when it comes to automation in general.
You're not going to be able to meet the demands of massive dependence on coal. I'm so sorry to say this, but the coal industry has already died, and people just don't know that yet. But it's not coming back, despite what President Trump is saying. And I know that's bad news for people in West Virginia, Ohio, parts of Pennsylvania, but it's just not happening.
If fossil fuels are catalysts of climate change, reducing our dependence on them is a key point in many of the candidates' plans, as is incentivizing corporations to limit carbon dioxide emissions. There are some states that still generate their electricity primarily via coal. And how do we get them to switch to a cleaner energy so that if I operate my electric vehicle, I'm not increasing emissions?
Well, look, again, as a nation, in my view, and what our plan is about, is moving us away from fossil fuel. That's coal, oil, gas. We call for the end of fracking. And what we do that among other ways by simply eliminating all of the subsidies and tax breaks that the fossil fuel industry gets, which amounts to hundreds of billions of dollars.
There are just 3 industries in America that produce together about 70% of all our carbon emissions. You push those 3 industries, and all of a sudden the world looks different. So by 2028, what I plan is that all new new buildings will have 0 carbon footprint. No more carbon emissions from our buildings. By 2030, all new cars and light duty trucks, 0 carbon footprint. And by 2035, the production of electricity, 0 carbon footprint. Think about that. Pow, that's 70% of our carbon emissions.
Carbon dioxide is a key ingredient accelerating the changes in the world around us. But Senator Cory Booker tells the Weather Channel's Stephanie Abrams, carbon emissions do not affect all Americans equally.
You know, when you see these news reports that you all do, the hottest month on record last July, that has an immediate impact on disadvantaged communities. So in my community in inner city Newark, when the temperature goes up, you have respiratory problems. You have folks that don't have the same kind of protections. Heat stroke is more common. Asthma becomes more common. So we already know that in the United States of America, you're seeing hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of just health challenges to people as a result of climate change. So for me, this isn't a distant issue. This is an everyday urgency because it's aligned in many ways with issues of environmental justice.
I look at the often ignored communities that include on this issue are indigenous people, the tribes who for centuries, long before anyone else arrived here, the native people, had customs and strategies and rituals that were about preserving these natural resources. And they must be at the table. So my approach to this is that I'm not going to just say, oh, I'll study the impact on these various communities. I'm aware of them and I care about them. I'll study the impact on them. No, I'm going to have them at the table when we're creating the plan. Because frankly, these communities don't want us to just tell them what we've done to them. They want to participate in telling us what they want and what they need.
These are our friends, neighbors, family, who are in communities that decade after decade after decade have been injured from having the dirtiest plants put near them, the dumps put near them, fires allowed to burn near them, so that it's had health impacts on the dirt that's left behind, impacts that are still felt in the air. So when we, and as we invest in cleaning up, I think it's critical
and leader of the free world.
There will be massive numbers of people dislocated in a place like Bangladesh, and that it will have social and ultimately military implications.
You're going to have war, and those wars can be inflamed.
Not much. How about you?
Are you answering my text in person?
I am, yeah.
LOL, come on in.
This is tech that helps you be there. The Nissan Altima, now offering the most tech-advanced engine in its class.
Oh, great presentation, Tim. Could you email me the part about Geico, making it easy to switch and save hundreds?
Oh, yeah, sure.
You don't know my name, do you?
Of course I know your name. I just get you mixed up with the other guy. What's his name? What's your name?
Switch to Geico. You could save 15% or more on car insurance.
Could you just tell me? I want this to be over.
Start saving with Target Holiday Deals. Shop early deals on home appliances, electronics, and more during the Black Friday preview sale. Friday and Saturday only. New holiday deals arrive all season long. Only at Target.
Breathe. Every breath makes you feel closer to nature. And every sip makes nature feel closer to you. Michelob Ultra Pure Gold. Beer in its organic form.
During an emergency, a network becomes a critical line of communication. Connecting first responders to technology and to each other. FirstNet is the only officially authorized, highly secure wireless network without throttling or the clutter of commercial traffic. Built with and for first responders. It's the help you need to help the people who need you.
The United States Defense Department calls it our greatest threat to national security, a changing climate putting our military at risk at home and abroad.
How would you prioritize climate in the defense strategy?
It has to be critical in front lines. When you read the military reports and intelligence reports, we're anticipating in about 20, 25 years, if we do nothing, really a planet slipping more and more into peril, more famines and droughts, more instability, more migration crisis, and even more a possibility for terrorist organizations to whip people up, to recruit and do more within that instability and that chaos.
The fact that they say there will be massive numbers of people dislocated in a place like Bangladesh, and that it will have social and ultimately military implications is the kind of forethought I think that we want to give to this problem.
When there is a drought, when food insecurity increases, that can cause or worsen conflict. And there's a great deal of evidence that we're already beginning to see the first of what will eventually be hundreds of millions of displaced persons as a consequence of climate. That kind of migration could be incredibly destabilizing and is absolutely a national security problem.
We know that climate refugees are going to continue to increase in number as the desertification of more land, for example, in Africa, means that people can't till the soil. They will become climate refugees. As people lose access to water, they will become climate refugees. As the shorelines impinge on their traditional homelands, they will become climate refugees. And it's true all around the world. The consequence of that is not simply that people will need aid and help, but it's also that it will produce more conflict. There will be fights over water. There will be fights over land that can be farmed for food. And this poses a threat in the local areas, but it poses a global threat.
How would you prioritize the climate in the defense strategy?
I would prioritize it as much as the former Joint Chiefs of Staff said is the other paramount threat to our nation, which is our federal debt. So they're tied together. Climate change is our existential threat. But cognizant of the fact that we're $23 trillion in debt right now, how can we address this threat without damaging the American economy, without destroying jobs, with making sure that our children are as best protected as they can in the future? It's got to be a combination.
And you've said that climate change poses perhaps an even greater threat to our national security than, say, ISIS or Al-Qaeda.
Absolutely it does. ISIS,
so.
Because it is the entire globe. It is the fact that if people around the world do not have water to drink or land to grow their crops, they're going to migrate. And when they migrate into other people's territory, you're going to have war. And those wars can be inflamed and grow. We're already seeing the national security impact of climate change, of people leaving rural areas where they're no longer able to farm and go into cities and causing all kinds of problems.
This is a national security issue because we're seeing drought all over the planet. What does drought mean? You can't grow food. When people can't eat where they live, they leave that place. And they go to places that have different cultures and speak different languages and may pray to a different God. And what does that result in? Conflict. What does conflict result in? War.
Stability.
Not only is this a security issue, it's a leadership issue. America's departure from the Paris Climate Agreement provoked international criticism, and the candidates we spoke with say that rejoining the agreement is only the first step.
One of the worst things for America's standing in the world is for the leaders of the world to gather to discuss one of the most serious problems confronting the whole global community, and for there to be an empty seat where U.S. leadership ought to be. And if I'm president, that won't happen.
Everybody around the world wants to get to the American consumer, because American consumers buy a lot of stuff. And yet, right now, we barely do more than lip service about whether or not our companies are having to compete in areas where environmental standards are much worse, which one way to think about that is we're basically just exporting pollution. We say, oh no, don't do it here in the United States because we have EPA regulations, but dump in the air and the water in Mexico, Vietnam, wherever it is. We shouldn't be doing that. And in fact, what we should be doing is a couple of things. We should be saying, you want to get to the American market, then you got to meet some basic standards for those manufactured goods that you want to sell over here. Like it or not, we are deeply intertwined around this earth, and we need to be looking at a climate solution that works worldwide. We are leaders on climate policy.
I do think that America has a place to lead in this equation, given the fact that we're about more than almost 25% of the world's economy. We're only about 5% of the world's population, but we've got a big economic footprint, and as a consequence, I do think we need to lead on the issue. And what we want to be careful about, though, is not creating one set of rules for America and for Western Europe, and a completely different set of rules for India and China, where